We invite on the dais Mr. Arvind Singhal, Chairman, Technopack Advisors, as moderator, and Mr. Sanjay Lalbhai, CMD Arvind Limited. Mr. Arvind Singhal, Chairman and MD, Technopack, which is one of India's leading management consulting firms focusing on retail consumer products and e-tailing, fashion, textile and apparel, food services and agriculture and education. Mr. Singhal is an active member of various professional bodies and also director in many industry forums. I also take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Sanjay Lalbhai, Chairman and Managing Director, Arvind Limited. Sanjay Lalbhai could have joined the family business that was quite massive in scale and size, but he chose to tread his own path to carve his own identity. Other than textiles, this group has stakes in retail shops, real estate, engineering, water management, and telecom, and construction too. But garment is the signature business of Arvind Group. His Renovision, denim, made the city known as Manchester of India in the past to be called today as the capital of denim. Life must be savored in every way is the philosophy by which he lives. I now invite Mr. Arvind Singhal to moderate this session.
Thank you very much. And I would like to first start by thanking CT for this great, it's not a coffee with Mr. Lalbhai, but it's certainly better than coffee with Karan for sure as far as I'm concerned. So thank you very much for giving me this privilege to actually engage Sanjay Bhai into what I hope would be a very, very interesting interactive session with him. There are no presentations, it's a set of questions there. Just to put in perspective where we are, Indian textile industry is probably, in my opinion, one of the favored industries as far as God is concerned, whichever God we believe in. There. Notwithstanding any number of missed opportunities in the last 100 years, God gives us one more opportunity and yet one more. I'm not a historian as far as textile industry goes, but we all understand from our history books that Indian textiles were well known way back in the 15th, 16th century, 16th and 17th century. When India's GDP was almost 35% of the world GDP, we're talking about in the year 1600, textiles and spices were actually what India was really known for there. If we fast forward, India also had some of the first early cotton textile mills in the later part of the 19th century. Sanjay Bhai's own very illustrious family set up their first textile unit way back in 1897. India then got its first real big boost to the textile industry during the First World War, and then the Second World War, and then the Swadeshi movement. All of these three, the war efforts first, and then the Swadeshi movement, led to a boom in creation of local capacity as far as good quality textiles are concerned, of course cotton-based. As many as about 400 mills were actually set up in India between 1900 and 1940. So you can see the kind of excitement, enthusiasm Indian textile industry had in the beginning of the previous century. And again, Sanjay Bhai's family, I was doing some research on the family as a preparation of this session there. Even the vision in 1930 and 40 was to think big and think out of the box. So at that time, I'm told when the investment cycles used to be 5 to 10 lakhs, the family put up a textile plant, which at that time cost about 35 lakhs, almost 6-7 times bigger. Not much has changed as far as the DNA is concerned of Mr. Lalbhai and the family. The Renovision, we all understand. My first interaction with Sanjay Bhai was actually way back in mid-90s when he had just dreamt of Santej. The mega project of Santej was just in the commissioning stage there. And even at that time, whatever numbers were being talked about seemed absolutely audacious there. India needs much more audacity than only from Sanjay Bhai there. We all know that in early 90s, China's textile industry and India's textile industry was not very far away. Today, if you look into 2013-14, China's textile industry is 7 times, almost 7 times bigger than that of India, 7 times. In absolute numbers, we find it very difficult to move the needle as far as exports are concerned, from 20 billion to 25 billion to 30 billion to 36 billion. And with a lot of skepticism, we have put up a target to increase our exports to 50 billion in the next 2 years and maybe add another 30 billion. We know China does more than $260 billion in exports even now and continues to grow despite whatever we know that their currency is appreciating, the labor cost is also getting very, very high. China's labor availability is shrinking despite all of those constraints. China still adds much more every year to its textile juggernaut than what India is only dreaming right now. So most certainly we require many, many more of Sanjay Lalbhais today. We need more role models as far as India goes, who can think audacious, who can think big, who can think scale, and scale not by Indian standards, scale by international standards, so that we should at least say that it's not that we are big. We should say we are actually competing with China as far as global market is concerned. And final competition will only be when our size of exports of the global market actually goes from the current $36 billion to at least $100, $150 billion in the next few years. Only then we can even say that we are somewhere close to that. So this is the broad perspective where we are at a very, very important cusp of India's textile industry and history. There are opportunities galore. We know that the opportunities are there in the conventional textiles, in advanced textiles, technical textiles, everywhere. There is there. The world trade is likely to grow by another $500 billion in the next 5 or 6 or 7 years' time. China is likely to concede at least $50 to $60 billion of additional market simply because of its moving away from what it is doing today. All of that market is up for grab and then some more. So with this background, Sanjay bhai, my first question to you is that where has India really missed the bus in the last 20 years? There was a huge amount of optimism in early 90s that finally when the quotas will go away in 2005, Indian industry will just rock. But it hasn't planned out like that. So where do you think we have missed in the last 20 years?
Good evening, all friends. I think if you really look at the world trade, in 2003 it was around $430 billion. By 2012, it's around $750 billion. And it is likely to be $1,150 billion by 2020. I think in 2003, we were 3% of the world trade. And we have graduated to only 4.5% by 2012. In the same time, China was 17% in 2003, and they have achieved a market share of the world trade to the extent of 33%. So it's a huge kind of, move in the last 10 years, and that's what shows the kind of dominance which China has. Now, I think it's quite obvious as to what has gone wrong. We have not been able to think scale. We have not gone for verticalization. That is one of the major problems. I think if you really ask me as to why we are not getting the business away from China when China has become more expensive than India, the only main reason is that we are not vertical. We are still dependent on Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Cambodia or Vietnam to convert our fabrics into garments. And when you talk to the major buyers in Europe and America, they are saying that we want to bring business from China into India, but where do we convert it into final garment? Now, Bangladesh has unfortunately gone through a compliance issue, so things are a little, unsure there. So with this problem, unless India can take up garmenting very seriously and build scale, I'm a little worried that we'll not be able to take away market share from China. And this, what Arvind was just saying, that in the next couple of years, or 4 years, 5 years, the world trade will grow by $400 billion. And are we going to be able to take a substantial pie of that? The entire thing depends on whether we'll be able to go for garmenting or verticalization. So this is the major challenge, I think, before all of us. And we will, as you have all known, that garmenting in India is a very troubled kind of industry. No one has reached scale. There is Shahi, there are certain prominent groups which are doing well, but no one has been able to reach the kind of size which the Chinese companies have reached. You know, you can see there, they have built dormitories, they've brought 30,000 workmen at one location, and they've got scale. Now, none of us have built dormitories, none of us have really tried to solve the problem of labor shortage. We all complain about labor shortage. We all say that, you know, if you really go to the crux of the problem, then garmenting is not viable only because of absenteeism and attrition. Because our factories are built in Bangalore or in Chennai or in the major metros, where the same labor is fighting for various other, they've got many options. If you go into the interior, then management becomes a problem. You cannot hire good executives. And even then, the labor is only available from the adjoining villages, which is also constraining the size and scale which is required to take away this market share. So these are the challenges, and we'll have to develop a model. I think there is no other alternative but to build very large dormitories, bring 10,000, 15,000 workmen from wherever they are available, anywhere in India, house them there, and build scale. If we are not going to be able to do this, I'm sorry, but I think India will miss the boat, and then I think the other countries or the buyers will start looking at other alternatives. The other problem which I see is that when I want to export to Japan, Southeast Asia, Canada, Africa, South Africa, all of them require package, full package. They are not interested in buying fabrics. They are smaller companies. They are not interested, and Japanese buy, they've been spoiled by China. They can go to China and buy the full package. Why will they come to India? So they are willing to pay 10%, 15%, 20% premium, but they want good products, they want innovation, they want product development, they want design inputs in their products, they want value-added products, or they want scale. So all these things are missing in India. So this is the problem, and I think unless we grapple with this problem and unless we can come up with a solution, I think the huge opportunity which is there, because what has changed? I think things have dramatically changed. We were all at 48 rupees for such a long time. Now we are 62 rupees. We were just doing one modeling, and we came to the conclusion that even if I had to supply a pair of jeans to Walmart, I will get a 30% ROCE in my garmenting factory. We are that viable. Now the question is, can we create scale? Can we build a factory which will do 20 million garments and not, anyone? I've been talking because I am supplying fabrics to all the major converters in India. They are all talking about we are building a new capacity, 100,000 garments a month. Now, if you are going to think this scale, then you are never going to be able to take away this market share which we are all talking about. And as Arvind was rightly saying, we are $33 billion last year. This year we may, achieve 35, 36. But we are just, very, very slowly growing in this market where we are one of the most competitive countries in the world. So this is the major issue. And I'm sure that we will find solutions. I'm sure that the young generation will rise to the occasion. We'll see the kind of things which China has done. there is no rocket science here. There is no very complicated situation. It's just simple, good execution. And I'm sure that the newer generation will take this opportunity and take India where it should be.
Well, Sanjay, in any case, even rocket science, Indian scientists are not doing so badly. So even if it was rocket science, I'm sure we can do much more than that. And your point is absolutely well taken that we need to think about verticalization, and we certainly need to think about the scale. But don't you think another challenge for India, which is also an opportunity, is far too long India has actually been knowingly, unknowingly focused only on one fiber, which is cotton, whereas we know that almost 60-65% of the world market is actually through man-made fiber and blends. So what can be done by India to actually redress this balance?
See, lots of things can be done. One is that I think we need scale and size in raw material, which our friends Reliance is there. There are quite a few companies which are growing and providing us that. So raw material is available. Of course, one of the issues we have faced is that still China has created such huge capacities, and in some of the basic raw materials, as far as man-made fibers are concerned, China is still has the price advantage or price competitiveness. Having said that, I mean, we are importing man-made fibers from China, converting it in our technical textile division and exporting. And we are competing very well with China. Because I believe that in value-added segment, once you bring the fiber from China, we are now more competitive in converting it into the final product as far as India is concerned. So, and the Indian domestic market is also a price-sensitive market where man-made fibers would really provide you that kind of an opportunity of coming out with innovative products. And if you look at the women's wear segment, then logically it is not cotton, it is all man-made fiber. And women's segment is a very large segment. As you all must be knowing, the domestic market is almost $60 billion, growing at 8 to 9%. And a good part of that is man-made fiber. So not only looking at exports, not only competing with Korea, Taiwan, China, and all these countries in man-made fibers or fabrics or garments in the global arena, but one should also tap and see as to how one can come up with innovative products and new products which can augment the domestic market, which is one of the greatest strengths of this country. Only China and India are the two countries which also have this great advantage of a very, very buoyant and very vibrant domestic market, which is not there for any of our competitors. You know, if you look at Bangladesh, if you look at Sri Lanka, if you look at Pakistan, then they don't have this advantage of domestic market. So we will have to take advantage of the domestic market. Again, create scale. See, if we cannot create scale, then in the value-based products, we will not be able to take away market share. So I personally believe that one is that we require more competitive framework in the raw material part of this business, which I'm sure is possible because with the kind of players like what we have, they think scale. I mean, if Reliance doesn't think scale, there is no one who can think scale. So we are blessed that there are companies in the raw material arena where scale is not an issue. Now the responsibility of the value-added segment, that the weavers, the processors, and the garment manufacturers, or if it is technical textiles, then as you know, there are so many other opportunities in technical textiles. So all these people will have to ensure that they don't only think in terms of cotton, and we diversify our portfolio. Even with cellulosic fiber, there are huge opportunities in women's category. Arvind itself has started a major thrust in women's segment, and we are using all kinds of fiber. So it is our stated policy that we will be in the next 10 years, we will go to almost 30 to 40% man-made, we'll be using more man-made fibers, almost up to 30 to 40%. So opportunities are there. I think we can compete. Wherever there are technology gaps or wherever we need to, or there is some kind of an IPR involved, then we should join hands with Taiwanese companies, Korean companies, Japanese companies, and bring those joint ventures to this country and don't reinvent the wheel and make this entire new opportunity, make it into a substantial opportunity.
I'm very glad that you brought up the subject of domestic market opportunity, because almost every conference I go to, every interaction I have with the government of India, it's always only about export. And we have a $60 billion domestic market, which actually can be stimulated to much more. And when you see automobile sector, when you see telecom sector, there are so many sectors where the market has really grown much, much faster than the GDP growth rate. What do you think can be done for stimulating domestic demand? Scale is one part, certainly. Product development innovation also is there. Is there something more to that?
See, let's look at the domestic market. The retail and as I was just saying, that the total textile clothing is $60 billion, growing at 9%. Now the apparel and the retail segment is $40 billion, out of which around 16% is the organized retailing, and which is growing at around in double digits, 20 to 30%, So that's the fastest growing segment, the organized retail part of it, which is only $6 to $7 billion as of now. Now, if you really study the history of various countries which have become developed countries, then there has been an inflection point. You know, once the per capita income crosses $1,000, then people start spending for the wardrobe, their wardrobe, or towards the apparel category. And when the per capita income crosses $2,500, which has happened in China, there is a huge shift in spending on their wardrobe. And people want to dress up, people want to start buying for various occasions, you know, not only for ceremonial things like weddings and all that, but you will have an evening dress, you will have a party dress, you will have an outdoor dress, you will have a sports dress, you will start investing in your wardrobe, you know, thoroughly. So that inflection point has still not come in India. We have just barely touched $1,000. And as we have seen, you know, our brands are growing at 35 to 40% year in, year out. Today, Arvind has 2,000 crores of brands and retail business, which we are projecting that by 2017 will be $1 billion company only in brands and retail. So there is such a huge kind of, you know, growth opportunity which is there in brands and retail. And this is all going to happen because per capita incomes are going to go up. A huge middle class is emerging. People's aspirations are, you know, already there. People want to buy, and we were very surprised that in Patiala, you know, we opened a Tommy Hilfiger. It has become the third most productive store in India. So that shows you that we were ourselves surprised that in these kind of towns, how such aspirational brands like Tommy, where the, you know, the t-shirt is sold at 2,000 rupees, shirt is sold at 3,000 to 5,000 rupees. And these kind of aspirational brands are taking off in B and C category towns of India. So there is a huge opportunity. And on the contrary, as far as we are concerned, we are looking at brands and retail as a huge business opportunity in India. And as a result, I think with the per capita income and the economy doing well, the domestic market is going to be the most lucrative market. And today, I am buying 100% of my garments from outsourced situation. We have no factories of our own. We have developed number of entrepreneurs to supply to us. So there is a huge opportunity for garmenting or for the entire value chain to start supplying to the domestic market, domestic players. And as the organized players become large, it will be equally profitable. Why do you need to only export to a Gap in America? You know, why not to the local Louis Philippe? I mean, Louis Philippe is giving me the same kind of run. You know, if I am supplying 5,000 meters a design to someone abroad, I am supplying 10,000 or 15,000 meters per design to domestic players. So there is nothing wrong with the emerging domestic market. So I am very buoyant. I am very hopeful that the industry will start looking at the domestic market. And what China is doing is, Chinese government is very clear that they are now not going to emphasize on exports. They are encouraging domestic consumption. They have made their currency strong. They want to have more buying powers in the hands of their citizens, and they are encouraging domestic consumption. So there are so many textile units in China which have started focusing on their domestic market, which will emerge as one of the largest markets even ahead of America. So these are the kind of changes which are going to happen in the next 10, 15 years. And we can't only think in terms of exports. We have to really take advantage of this huge potential domestic market.
Sanjay, you are obviously very strong in export, and you're very strong in domestic. You're very strong in the entire value chain in most of the product categories you are in, or you will be in there. With this bird's eye view about Indian textile and clothing industry distribution, what do you think are the main strengths of Indian textile industry today? And a corollary question, what are the main weaknesses besides the scale and verticalization?
See, one of the things which I have really regretted is that we have not been able to, well, I did Renovision, and when I joined business, textiles was considered to be a sunset industry. You know, power looms were taking over and all the composite mills were dying. So we coined a word called Renovision. The whole objective was to reposition textile as a very viable, vibrant and value-creating business, which I am sure that I have failed, because we had a dip, as you all must be knowing. So it's not all glorious things which Arvind has talked about me. I have had my ups and downs. But we have failed in repositioning textile as a very value-creating industry. when all the investors or when you watch CNBC or any of the business channels, do you ever hear of textiles? Hardly, correct? I mean, you will only hear about pharmaceutical companies or automobile companies or refineries or telecom companies or things like that. Who's talking about textiles? Now, textiles, as you all know, which is so much percentage of GDP and which is so much percentage of our total exports and which gives so much employment to India. Still, who has created consistent value for its investors? See, unless you create value for your investors, your industry cannot be re-rated. And it is our joint responsibility that we create consistent value for the investors. Because many of us are managing publicly quoted companies where people have put in their hard-earned money. And what kind of returns we have been able to provide. So this is one of the biggest challenges and the problems textile industry has faced. And all of us have failed. So we have started thinking, and what I am thinking is that I have met a whole lot of investors and asked them that why is my PE multiplier in textiles only 5 to 6? And why are you giving a PE multiplier to me only in my branded business of 18 to 20 rupee, 20%, 20 times my EBIT, correct? PE multiplier of 18 to 20 in brands and retail and only 5 to 6 in textiles. The answer is very simple. There is no rocket science again here. You know, textile industry doesn't consistently grow by 15 to 16 to 20%. Every investor wants to see a consistent, constant, predictable growth. One problem. The other thing they want to see is that what is the return on capital employed? What is your ROCE? They want to see a ROCE of 20% or more, which again consistently, some of us, all of us, or today many of us are generating 20% ROCE. But have we been consistently generating 20% ROCE? The answer is no. And the third most important criteria is that are you able to generate free cash flow? Correct? If you have to grow at 20%, can you still generate free cash flow, or all that money will get invested in, again, creating new capacities and working capital to grow at 20%? So if you have to grow at 20%, you get 20% ROCE, and all that money is getting reinvested in creating that 20% growth, then investors will not rate you higher. So can we develop a asset-light model? Correct. There are so many people in India today, entrepreneurs in India, who are willing to invest in a spinning capacity. There are so many investors who are willing to invest in a weaving capacity. So what we have started doing is that any entrepreneur who is interested, we are saying we assure you 18% return on your equity. Now where will you get 18% return? Today it is not that simple. We assure you 18% return because luckily we are also one of the most supported industry in the country. Correct? There is no one who has got so much support from the government. State government, central government. We have got subvention on interest costs. We get money at 2%. If you leverage your balance sheet and if you put up a spinning mill with 25% equity, 75% debt, and you borrow at 2% net on your debt, to give 18% return is very simple. It will still be lower than the market price which you pay for yarn. It will be still lower for your weaving per pick cost. Per pick cost, if you go and ask for certain product category, 20 paisa per pick. If you give 18% return, I am getting at 14 paise. Correct? So why do you need to create assets? In your books, create assets, let other entrepreneurs earn, create this entire network. You only invest in value-added areas of processing, invest in distribution, invest in building capabilities on products, product innovation, design innovations, going closer to the becoming more, customer-centric. So large companies need to do this. They need to develop these clusters like what have emerged in, there are so many clusters which are successful like Tirupur or Surat or Bhiwandi or all kinds of clusters. So develop these clusters. Let other people partner with you. And you then create an asset-light model so that when I can go back to my investor and say, now rate my textiles at par with brands and retail. Give me a 15 multiplier. and then my market cap, and I can really reward my investors. So we need to rethink this. And unless we rethink, and unless there are 20 companies doing this on a consistent basis, the industry will not get re-rated. It cannot be re-rated because there is one company trying to do this, correct? So it is our joint responsibility that we give it a thought, we look as to what the investors or how to create value for investors, and we develop a new model which is absolutely possible to do with so much help. If with so much help we can't do it, we'll never do it, is my personal feeling. So I am very positive. I think my Renovision 2 will come up. I'm sure that if I fail again, someone else will take the baton and move forward and make this work. That let us get this textile industry re-rated in this country. And I think it is very possible.
I'm very glad you brought up this point about the valuations and the investor interest. It is so important to actually put textile industry on the same platform. Even if you look into garment companies, just for the audience's benefit, I mean, you would have heard about a company like Myntra, which is a pure play e-commerce player selling only textile clothing. On a 250 crore turnover this year, market valuation in terms of the private equity, 1600 crores, not selling at that. They are now looking at 3000 crores market cap, or in terms of the next round of funding which is going in there, and they're talking about even then 5x of the revenues 1 year later there. So yes, absolutely, industry also has to do a lot in terms of re-rating itself before the investors re-rate it. Which brings me to the next question. Why should India? And again, so many times I have personally seen, you might have also encountered, we always end up competing ourselves or comparing ourselves with Bangladesh. This year they're doing 20 billion, we're doing only $18 billion in garment exports, or Sri Lanka, or Vietnam, or Myanmar. Why are we not looking into branding Indian textiles and branding Indian textile industry? I'm not talking about product brands, but the textile industry, why should it not be the next Italy? Why should it be the better version of Bangladesh? Any thoughts on this?
No, absolutely. I think I also didn't tell you one thing. When I was talking about re-rating the textile industry, I would like to complete the whole thing. There are three, benchmark companies which we have identified. One is Xinzhou in China, which is a $1.4 billion company. It is just now trading at a PE of 16. The other is Texwinca, which is a $1.5 billion company in China, which is trading at 17 PE multiplier. The third is Pacific Textiles. They are in knits, as we all know them, and they are trading at 18 PE multiplier. So there are companies, in China, correct, and there are no companies in India which are trading at this kind of a PE. So it is absolutely possible if Chinese, and these are not very value-added, differentiated companies which cannot be duplicated. These are reasonably good companies, vertical, very efficient, growing very well. Their capex to top line is very favorable, and they are throwing up free cash flow. So they are following this model, and they've been quite successful. To answer your question, I think we can re-rate. I've been talking about re-rating the textile industry. I think the opportunities are everywhere. Brand India will only emerge if we become customer-centric. We'll have to first find out, and if we are going to boast about Brand India, and if we want to compare ourselves with the more differentiated, value-added products coming from, let's say, Italy or any of the European destinations, we'll have to invest in product development and design. Now, our whole mentality is to create assets, because assets are the easiest to create. Just go, invest in the most modern machines, get subsidies from the government, run it as easily as possible, and do not work on these softer issues. It is very easy to create assets. It's completely a different problem and a task to create the software of textiles. The software of textiles is working with some of the best designers in the world, is working with some of the most creative product development people in the world, and coming out with newer products, newer processes, newer way of doing business constantly. Unless we learn this, which we have, if you say that Indians are creative by nature. So if I have to compare Indians, I'll compare them with Italians. As Italians are capable, they are design forward, We are not very structured. We can't do the same thing very well. We are not Germans, but we are like Italians. But we are not creative enough in this textile business. I can't think of many companies which are constantly innovating and investing a lot in the softer aspects of the business. Where are our systems and processes? Where have we professionalized this business? You see, you can't create scale and still run it with your own hands. You'll have to professionalize. You'll have to bring in systems and processes. Correct? If you can't do all this, then you can't again start comparing yourself with the more creative, countries in the world which have positioned their textiles differently. So I would say that the younger generation will have to think about, bringing professionalism into this business. I have seen more entrepreneurs in textiles. Why? But entrepreneurs doesn't mean that you need to manage with your own hands. Why can't you bring in very good professionals, correct? You will have to incentivize them. You will have to make them your partners. You will have to give them on variable cost. And finally, if I have to bring a guy from Unilever into textiles, I'll have to give him stock options. And those stock options will be only meaningful if I'm creating value. If I'm not creating value, what will he do with that paper? He will do nothing with that paper. So this is a whole virtuous cycle you have to create. You have to make this industry more valuable. You have to create value. You have to bring the best minds. They need not be from textiles. And I tried that. I failed, of course. I brought a lot of non-textile people, and I didn't succeed. That doesn't mean it was a wrong move. I can assure you. I think unless you get the critical mass of people, and unless you have processes and systems and processes where personal capabilities are not required, mostly, once you do a thing in a particular way, the result would be predictable. So unless you have systems, processes, you can't bring people from outside of textiles. And I'm not into so much of a debate on whether to bring textile people, not textile people. You see, the IITians are as bright as they are, anywhere in the world, I mean, in any other industry. But when an IIT person joins you, you ask him to be 50-year-old before he becomes a head of any department. Now, this is not today's world, In 6 years, he would want to be the head of your weaving or processing or, head of your spinning project. Now, unless you can empower people who are younger, you create a young organization, you create a delayerized organization. And without that, you are not going to be able to achieve the kind of excellence which we are looking for. You will achieve it on a smaller scale. I'm not saying, because I believe in the enterprise of all of you. Some of you are brighter than the professionals which we can ever bring. So there is nothing wrong with our enterprise. There is nothing wrong with the energy and the abilities of our entrepreneurs. But can you create scale? And you all know that some people who tried to create scale without empowering have failed. There are examples. I don't need to name them. All of us know them. Correct? So you can't create scale without empowering. Today people ask me, do you work 12 hours? I said, no, I work 5 hours because I have no work. Because I have got professionals who are making my businesses run. And if you ask my customers, they don't know me now. They know only the professionals who are running my businesses. So this is possible. This is possible in textiles, that you can get very good people and you can empower them, and then you will have all the time in the world to do creative things which you should be doing. So I think these are the things which we need to change in textiles if we want to re-rate textiles in a value-added manner.
So do you think it's beginning to happen or it's still to happen?
Well, it's a question of your DNA. I think entrepreneurs don't like to delegate. Somehow the other, they like to cling to things, and they have very less ability to trust. And I am saying business cannot be built on trust. Business has to be built on systems and processes and checks and balances. But you should be able to delegate. And I can assure you that when I was running the factory myself, it was easier. When I have to empower someone and expect him to give me the results which I am looking for, it is much more painful. It is much more difficult. But I think once you invest in that process and once you get it right, It is one of the most rewarding things which you can do. Because then you free up your energies, you free up yourself, and this can be done. Whether it is happening in certain companies. I mean, we are not the only one who have professionalized. There are companies, and there are large companies which are successful in this country. I mean, they are fairly well professionalized. I mean, some of you are sitting here, right here. So I don't think it is difficult to professionalize. And you need to work with you need to create a bunch of entrepreneurs managing spinning, weaving, and all the processes which you need not do yourself. So this is absolutely possible.
So I'm very, very hopeful that maybe within a couple of years' time, leading business schools in India, leading engineering colleges in India, textile industry would be the day one industry and company to go rather than software and consulting and otherwise.
I can give you some good news. In some of the IIMs, we are on day zero.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, coming back to scale, and you talked about Tirupur, you talked about Panipat, Ludhiana in a different context. Do you think it's now time to start thinking of creating new Tirupurs rather than modernizing them or new Ludhianas? Because they've reached a capacity.
Absolutely, and more than that, I think they have not been planned. They are unplanned. It is just entrepreneurs unleashing their capabilities. Yeah. But the government has not planned it. I think there is no infrastructure which has been worked out. Environment has been given a major pass, and that is not the way to create scale. So I think there is a huge need to create world-class infrastructure, and once you create world-class infrastructure, then scale is possible. So there is a great need to do this.
One suggestion I have personally given at a number of forums, including to the government directly, that why should we not take advantage of the Delhi-Mumbai corridor?
Sure.
It's a huge amount of investment going in there. There's a huge amount of support also coming in from Japan in particular. Yeah. And why should we not create new textile cities strategically located? So would you wish to champion that cause as well? When we're talking about the textile parks, they're good schemes. There's nothing against them. But 20 acres, 40 acres, 60 acres is not what we're talking about. We're talking about 6,000 acres, 10,000 acres. Only then a new cluster can come up.
No, absolutely. As I'm saying, if I want to create an asset-light model, I would want other people to run the assets. And then if other people are running the asset in a cluster, that unleashes a lot of power, because then flexibility, just in time. I mean, we are Zara, we are servicing Zara in 60 days from cotton to garment. So time is of essence, correct? Speed is of essence. And unless you create these clusters, you can't unleash this power. So it is absolutely necessary that we create these clusters, but in a much more organized and much more planned manner.
So I have, from my side, one last question for you. You've given your message to the entrepreneurs in terms of what they should be doing. But there are many, many professionals in this gathering as well. What would be your advice and message to them? How they should build their careers?
No, I think how they should build their careers, I think, unfortunately, some people come and tell me that I'm, with you because there are no opportunities outside. Now, that's not the way to build a career. That's not. So I would wish that unless all of us create this new textile environment where the best minds from the IITs and IIMs are willing to come and work with us, I think it's an unfortunate thing that, even today when I talk to IITs, they say that the first guys apply for IT, then they apply for electrical engineering, they apply for civil and chemical and this, and the people who do not get something, then they apply for textiles. Now, this is not the way to encourage professionals, correct? And I think it is my responsibility also that some of the professionals who work not get very well paid, because I don't think today's generation is looking at a very large pay package. People are looking at wealth creation as an opportunity. So are you going to be able to provide them wealth creation opportunity? When a guy retires from Arvind, would he be able to say that I am worth 100 crores? If you can do that, you have a message for professionals. I mean, you will be on day zero with everyone. I mean, what is then the difference between Levers and Levers doesn't give such good stock options.
No.
And tomorrow we also don't need to give such good stock options because then it's giving too much. But what I'm saying is that we need to make this industry much more desirable. We need to create, and unless you create value and unless you make it more desirable, the best professionals won't join you. So for professionals, I would say bear with us till we do this because they have not landed themselves in a industry which, you know, some of them say that I was in IMA and look at my colleague who's got how he is performing in Unilever and how I am performing in a textile company. Now that's not a very good comparison. Unless that comparison becomes good, I have to only say I'm sorry.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, unlike the coffee with Karan, if I were to go on the same vein, there are no chances on that show to ask questions from the guest, but you have all the opportunity today to actually corner Mr. Lalbhai and put any questions, and he has been very, very upfront about answering all my questions there. So questions from the audience to Sanjay Bhai?
Yes, please.
Nadia ji.
There used to be a time when textile share was in Mr. DCM or say Arvind used to be the leaders in the stock market.
Right.
You used to say that the stock market opens with the central market price.
Right.
The change came when the IT industry came. And the opportunities and the growth which were given to the investor in the IT industry, being the new industry, but were much more faster. Do you think that that was the period where we were derailed and this new industry or new concept of IT from 85 onwards made us the derail?
One thing, sir, I would say that I like to blame myself for my problems. I don't like to say that someone else created a problem for me. I think if we can't outperform IT in percentage of growth, in percentage of ROCE, and the percentage of free cash flow we can give to investors, of course we will get derailed. See, it's not a question of industry A, B, C. Why is pharmaceuticals doing so well? You look at the balance sheet of those companies. How much free cash flow they are throwing up. What kind of return on capital employed they are giving, correct? As long as you do the same, you will be the Infosys of tomorrow. See, your thing is, this is finance, this is science, correct? You need to match any other industry on these financial parameters. As long as we can do it, no one can derail us. We have failed. We have failed in doing that. When I started Denim, I grew at 40%. I threw up free cash flows, correct? And I had a ROCE upward of 30%. So Arvind became what it became. Because I could not continue with that momentum, I failed. Now, you can't blame IT for that. I have to blame myself for it. That I failed, I couldn't continue with the momentum. And Narayan Murthy could. So he is where he is and I am where I am. It's as simple as that.
But sir, do you think that the government of India is also partly responsible for it? Because of the policy?
No, sir. No. I think we have been supported the most, sir. I think I can't think of any other industry which has been supported to the extent that we have been supported. We have got duty drawback, correct? We have got subvention in interest cost. We have got capital subsidy. We've got power reduction for some of the initiatives. We've got VAT refund for some of the initiatives. Now what else do you want to, say, give me 20% ROCE, sir, that's the only thing left. There is nothing more to ask for. You know? I think it's shameful that we have been supported so much and then I think, even then we can't outperform Infosys. Infosys doesn't get a nickel. Yes, you can say that they don't have to pay sales tax, excise, blah, blah, blah. They are on an export model, fine. But they don't either get the subsidies. So I think we have no one else to blame but ourselves, sir. None.
Yeah, there's a question here, and then after that to you. Yeah, Prem.
Go ahead. Sanjay Bhai and Arvind, a fantastic interactive session. But I have just one paradoxical question. On the one hand, Arvind Bhai, Sanjay Bhai, we say we need to scale up. We have to have integration vertically. On the other side, the problem is we are neither the darling of the bankers nor of the stock exchange. There are only very few companies who will today be able to do what we are just talking about. How do the rest of the industry take it forward?
Sir, I think this is of a recent, this thing that unfortunately some of the, I think, yes, you are absolutely right that textiles is not a, I think there are good amount of NPAs and the bankers are not kind enough. But these are cyclicalities. I mean, bankers also funded us very generously, you know, and we let them down. So today we are in this precarious situation that bankers are not very willing to come forward to support us. This will always remain a problem unless we perform well and unless we, you know, don't get into situations where there are NPAs and defaults with the bankers. But having said that, the environment is good. So I think if we irrationally create assets without understanding the market or without understanding the kind of demand which is going on. See, this is the other problem, that we have this herd mentality. We believe that if denim is doing well, then there are so much capacity which comes into it that it creates an imbalance of demand supply. And then because you are in a commodity play, you can't differentiate yourself and you go into a sick environment. So I think it will be also important that just because money is available at a subsidized rate, we don't create these asset bubbles. We take this, you know, initiative of understanding an opportunity thoroughly and then only make investments. So the responsibility again is ours, that we change the perception of bankers and lenders and investors, that we are well-meaning, we will look after their interests and we will not let them down. But I think this will all change because I think some of the companies are started doing very well. Some of the companies are, I mean, even the garment industry, which was really in a bad situation, with 62 rupees, many of them have started doing pretty well. So I'm sure that this will turn. I think the question is, when the situation turns, ample money is available, what do we need to do? How do we need to, where do we need to build assets? Who needs to do what? Larger companies have to do something. Smaller companies or entrepreneurs can work with the larger companies rather than set up their own, because everyone can't build all capabilities. See, this is another thing, that when I ask someone, he feels, no, when this man is giving me an assured return, there must be a higher return. So I don't want to work with him on an assured return, you know. I would rather be an entrepreneur on my own. Now, everyone trying to do everything also slows down the progress of everyone. So I think what I have been talking about is absolutely doable, but we'll have to all change and we'll have to partner much more. We'll have to learn to work in a cluster. We'll have to not overtrade and trade cautiously, but at the same time, it is possible to grow at 15-20% and create a very valuable business for ourselves in this industry.
There's a question there.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, just behind you. Yes.
Sir, I'm Arun from Fiber to Fashion. US and European apparel brands and retailers have a very vibrant online retail section. Why is not the same with Indian brands?
Retail, I'm sorry?
Online retailing.
Oh, online retail. You see, I think we are, you must have known that now China is emerging as one of the largest e-commerce market in the world. They are overtaking America. So I am very, I was just with the McKinsey group and with Noshir, who's the director of McKinsey, and he told me, Mr. Lalbhai, before you keep on creating more assets and start opening more and more retail shops, which we are doing, be careful. There is going to be a disruptive thing which is going to happen because of e-commerce. The newer generation is so savvy on computers and they are not going to take the trouble to go and shop in a mall. So be very careful before you keep on creating more and more retail shops. So I think this disruption is going to come in India. The question is when, correct? And with 4G coming in, with better connectivity, and with the newer generation not wanting the inconvenience of going and buying from malls in our terrible traffic and terrible infrastructure, I think it's just a question of time before e-commerce is going to boom in India. So we are backing e-commerce dramatically, and we believe that is the business of the future.
Thank you, sir.
Sanjay bhai, you didn't have paid McKinsey any money for this advice. I would have gladly given that to you a year ago.
Right. No, I didn't pay.
Factory of the word at one point of time. Are we mentally suitable to that, or we look in between customization, branding, and scalability?
See, I think the world will keep on changing, and we'll have to adapt. Just because there was mass production and value-based merchandise, which was the craze, or which is the craze today, and which is the 60%, 70% of the market. But in next 20 years, what's going to happen, we'll have to all be careful and see. And I think customization is going to be the next wave, because after people buy brands, people are going to say, now I want to design my own wardrobe, because I'm clever enough. I don't want to rely on the credibility of a brand. I want to be creative, and I want a solution myself. I want to create my own wardrobe. So customization will become a very large part of tomorrow's business. Now, how large will it become? It's a crystal ball, looking into a crystal ball. So I don't know the time and the speed with which it is going to happen, but it is going to happen. And these may happen concurrently. So there would be large-scale, mass-produced goods which will be right for masses and certain segments of population, and there would be a certain segment which will get very, very, badly spoilt by customization, which is going to allow them to design their own wardrobe, and they are going to get all solutions sitting at home. So both these extremes are going to coexist, is what we believe. And Arvind itself is going into the next wave of customization, where we are saying the best fabrics in the world are available to you, and factories which are going to make customized suits. We have just signed with a Japanese company, correct? So every suit is going to be customized in a factory, correct? And it's an assembly line, but it has a technology where your measurements, and the measurements are taken on an iPad, correct, without touching you, and there are no mistakes. And then it is cut on an automated, computerized machine, so there are no mistakes again in cutting. And there will be a customized suit at 1/4 the value of a Kanali available to you with Kanali fabrics, correct, customized and delivered at home. So this is where the industry is going. This is what is going to be the future of tomorrow's customized solutions for tomorrow's customers, not in India, globally. And India can take a phenomenal, I can launch my customized brand called Create on the 5th Avenue in New York, correct? Because my factory is sitting in Bangalore. And I'll be 100 times more competitive than anybody else who's trying to do this. So tomorrow's world is very exciting. And it is going to use all these technologies and dramatically change tomorrow's, and service tomorrow's customer.
I'll just add a couple of points to this, a personal anecdote. My son actually makes a personalized pair of jeans, not only for Indian customers, for overseas. But what he mentioned to me recently was two of his oddest customization requirements. A customer in some part of South America wants emerald buttons. The other customer in Zurich wants actual bullet holes in the pair of jeans as a part of custom. So that's about how extreme customers can be. But manufacturing may not necessarily be fully customizable, I think, to the unit of one, but marketing most certainly would be. As the world moves to e-commerce, every individual is empowered with a retail shop in her hands, a smartphone. Interface design, product assortment selection for that customer, pricing for that customer is certainly within the realm of reality within the next couple of years' time. So that is the way customization is moving, at least as far as marketing is concerned. Vinodji. A mic here, please. हाँ बोल दीजिए आप जोर से बोल दीजिए
how you make your company future-proof transition, and what kind of transition have you planned? Because many of us are in the same situation.
I think succession planning is a very important, I mean, all investors also ask me because now it's not my company, it's investors' company. So as long as it's a publicly quoted company, succession plan will become very important. It's equally true for family-owned companies because, you know, unless you plan succession, if it happens by default, either good will happen or either bad will happen because you have not worked on it at all. So I think I would say that on complete merits, one will have to decide as to who's going to succeed the business after the, the veteran has retired or is in the mode of retiring. It is imperative that succession plan is made public. You give that person a chance to prove himself and he has to be groomed and mentored. So there is no, I mean, it is a process and that process has to be followed. And it is never very easy to mentor your own family because you have to also be able to tell them the hard facts in life. And when they don't perform, you should have the ability to reprimand them. So unless you do that and wear that mantle, I think you will fail in your responsibility. So it's a responsibility of every senior person who's likely to retire that he leaves behind a legacy or he leaves behind a management which is even more capable of managing and inheriting what is already existing.
Or otherwise, if you can speak louder. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Rajiv Arora, and I have met Sanjay Bhai a long time back. My question is a little bit outside India. I come from Africa, so my interest always prevails. As you have been in Africa and you've known Africa, there have been linkages with you. How do you see, as an emerging market, Africa to interact with India in terms of developing and enhancing value in textile and apparels for trade, in investment, and the future? How do you perceive that? Because today Africa is also growing at a very fast rate, and the GDP is going to double in the next 10 years, as we know. McKinsey has given a lot of reports on Africa. Lions are moving and all that. How do you perceive Africa to interact with India and developing a kind of a cohesive approach in terms of enhancing value of trade and investment? Thank you.
See, we are very clear that 2020 we'll be looking at average wage of 20 to 30,000. Come 2030, we'll be looking at 50,000 rupees as wage in India. That's the time garmenting will not be viable. So we have started putting our management team to start scanning Africa because that's the time that you'll have to relocate your assets. So I see Africa playing a very, very important role in the coming years because that's the continent which will have to provide the kind of manpower and the cost competitiveness. Unless everything becomes very expensive, then we'll have to, and by that time I can't again do crystal grazing. There may be 3D technology, 3D technology or?
Yeah, 3D.
And maybe making customized garments out of a small machine. So I don't know if something dramatically changes, but if it doesn't, and if we are limited to today's technology and the constraints by it, I think Africa will play a very important role. Otherwise, if Africa becomes a developed place and its wages are comparable with the rest of the world, then the domestic market would be very lucrative. So there would be investments required to service the domestic market. So either way, I think I see a very bright future for Africa going forward in textiles.
Sanjay, thank you very, very much. I have learned you talked about Renovision for version 2 for the textile industry, not only for Arvind Mills. You talked about scale. You talked about verticalization. You talked about systems and processes being the backbone to put scale and processes, and verticalization in place. You talked about going down the value chain by making the asset model very, very light on investments, focusing more on branding and others. You talked about collaboration rather than competition with people within the same value chain there. So all of these were great learnings, at least for me personally. I hope they have been the same for the audience here as well. So please join me in giving a big hand to Sanjay Lalbhai.
Thank you. Thank you.
We request Mr. B.K. Patodia, past Chairman City, to propose the vote of thanks. And then we would like to take this opportunity to present mementos to our esteemed speakers. We request Mr. Prem Malik, Chairman CT, to present a memento to Shri Sanjay Lalbhai. And to Shri Arvind Singhal.